Get away, Glenn.
Okay, so again, we're here for an initial discussion on Red Hat Identity Management or Free IPA. For those of you running CentOS, I'm Glenn Sneed. I'm a senior consultant with Red Hat, a little over 3.5 years now, and loving every minute of it. Like I said, who am I? Obviously, I already said what I do for a living. I'm a user of green and black terminal sessions because that's the way it's intended to be. And U.S. Air Force veteran. I served from 96 to 07. Got out when they started downsizing and offering early out packages. So I'm not retired, but I did get a nice big chunk of cash. Decided I wanted to do something else while I was still young enough to switch over. I am a home labber. I have my lab next to me, humming away quietly. My first machine was a Trash 80 color computer, the gray one, not the white one. Had to buy the cassette with a special cable to record my programs. And then my first, not really Linux, Unix exposure was on a Spark 3 in college running Sun OS with the old pizza boxes. My first Linux distro was like Ubuntu 11 proper distro, and I prefer using the VI improved editor or Atom, especially if I'm editing ADOC. And I don't do a lot of social media professionally, but I am on GitHub, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and sure, I'll check LinkedIn once in a while when they bother me enough. So about IDM Free IPA. So having taken the class, we covered things like use cases. What does IDM provide? So it's LDAP with a predefined schema, Kerberos authentication. You can do DNS and NTP, although it is not required, as long as everybody's talking the same NTP. SSL certificates. All of those self-signed certificates in your infrastructure, you can put proper certificates on there. You can centralize all your sudo rules, centralize AutoFS or your home directory mounts or whatever. You can create host-based access rules, so you can give people different sudo rules, limit what they are allowed to log into, what services they are allowed to use for login. You can let them log in with SSH, but not from the console, for example. And you can do Active Directory integration, although I will say it expects to be a kind of a sub-forest, a subdomain within the forest, and not everybody's cool with that. There is another way to do it where you have to sync with Active Directory, but it's only to one server. If that Active Directory server ever is taken out for maintenance, you lose the synchronization. So when should you use the Red Hat Directory Server or 389 Directory Server? So you have an application that needs to store schema in the LDAP database. You have more than 18 replicas, or you need the ability to extend the schema. So those are the stated use cases for the product. System requirements: current Linux distribution, RHEL or CentOS, 2 CPU sockets. That seems to be the normal now. Then 2 gigs of RAM will get you up to 10,000 users and 100 groups. It's better to have more RAM over disk space since most data is stored in cache. Each basic instruction is about 5 to 10 KB in size. Word on FIPS, it's not available in RHEL 8 yet. Just asked the question in chat last week, and they're like, yeah, there's a couple of open issues. And there are 15 IDM modules available for Ansible. So it's real nice when you're trying to set up a bunch of known host entries, or you want to set up a bunch of certificates, or you want to migrate a bunch of things that you have in YAML format. It does everything except installing the actual software itself. You still want to do that from the CLI. All right, demo time. The services I've already done because in my test it takes quite a while to run. The components, the IPA pieces itself, DNS bind more or less. Then dogtag is the SSL. If you use our Red Hat certificate server product, it's also dogtag. And I'm going to show you a user account, how to use a sudo rule, and we're going to try to register the client with my fingers crossed. Let me stop sharing this. All right, so I am logged into my IPA server, and it is FIPS mode on, and then my TMUX utility. Then I go over some of the options, and it's really nice. Can everybody see my terminal window? Bueller?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yep, I can see it.
Excellent. Okay. So just go through the options. A lot of stuff happens on the front end. If you don't want to, I would not put in the directory manager or admin password on the CLI because it'll ask you for that during install. I would define your IP address, your domain name, your realm name, and your intended host name for your IDM server. Let's see. If you don't want to do DNS, use the no host DNS there. I did not install the AD Trust package. I did set up DNS. There are options to use FreeIPA as a subdomain to your main CA. I've not done it myself. Don't do it in the home labs for obvious reasons. Then the other option you have are client options. Do you want to enable make home directory when a new user logs in? You want to use DNS SSHFP records. Those can get a little annoying if you've got a lot of machines that are being created and destroyed. Reason being is they store an extra SSH key in a different directory, and I think it's under var lib someplace. And every time you do a new machine, you'll get a different host key error checking error message, and your users will come to you and say, hey, what is this? How do I get rid of it? Let's see. You can also do the no NTP on your clients if you already have that set up. Most people do. It is necessary for Kerberos. Let's see. If we were doing, when I do DNS, I do not bother setting up any forwarders, just because I find it's a lot more efficient to add those forwarders into the global configuration. That is to try to create DNS forwarder zones or anything like that. And then I didn't mess with the AD Trust, but the options are there during install. Now let's see. Here are the packages. So the IPA server, the IPA server DNS, the IPA admin tools. Then after you install it, you need to use the firewall command to enable these services. It'll have to add in DNS, FreeID LDAP, FreeIPA LDAP secure, replication, and then of course the web options. That being said, let's try logging in. If you try to register one, you want to make sure you've got your you have things set up properly. I have my name server pointing configuration on my client pointing to my FreeIPA server. A ping. It comes back. No, that's working properly. I have not installed bind utilities or anything on this. This is just that. Let's see. Am I going to be able to? I'm going to have to install the IPA client. Because I haven't had time to set up proper DNS between my two domains, I'm going to do this quick workaround.
So, Glenn, while this is installing, have you
Yes.
looked at your direct message I sent you in chat?
Sure.
Through the Blue Jeans chat.
Oh, I am not. I am focusing on this other stuff. Let me see if I can even see the chat.
Well, while this was installing, I wanted to point out with RHEL 8.
So I haven't gotten much into the RHEL 8 IDM just because of the FIPS issue, since I do public sector work and all my clients are government, and FIPS is definitely something that they require. It looks like they're getting close to it. If you go into the RHEL 8 documentation, there are a large number of whereas in RHEL 7 there are like 2 documents that cover identity management. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate documents for RHEL 8. One for planning, one for installing, one for configuring and managing, and like 2 for disaster recovery. Yeah, I don't know how I got 2 of them, but it's there. But point being, it's a different kind of system. In RHEL 8, FIPS happens a little bit differently. They actually have a command line utility to configure FIPS. If you use it, when you configure SSH, instead of modifying the SSHD config file, you can actually define it in a file that is managed under etc system config. And it's just a little, everything's just a little bit different. It seems like they're moving.
What I was getting at is, though, the difference in how you actually install the package. Since RHEL 8 has the modules and application streams, the server actually in DL1, and you've got to select the profile to get AD Trust or the DNS or the server.
That's true. Yeah, and instead of installing this base packages, you can install it from the app stream. And it's a little, like I said, everything's just a little bit different. I haven't done it yet. I might be good for a future demo. Obviously, this is taking longer than I thought, just to install this one little package.
I'll go ahead and put the commands that in chat on where you can see that then for everyone in here, because now that I'm teaching some stuff, this has come up in public, and they don't care quite as much about FIPS, so they were really interested in getting the IDM server free IPA installed for RHEL 8.
Right.
So if you just want the server to be able to get the server packages, that last command in chat is what you're doing. Whereas if you wanted to do DNS, you do the /DNS to get the components. But what's interesting is that the stream it's coming from, instead of server, it's called DL1, and it's non-intuitive.
Yeah, it is not. I will say another thing we've learned in our Red Hat Tyson's lab is that someone built a RHEL 8 IDM server and they added it into the existing RHEL 7 IDM servers. It really does not work in that configuration. We kept having problems, and we figured out that they really expect you to, once you start down the RHEL 8 path, they expect you to continue and migrate all of your servers over to RHEL 8. So it's like the Rel 8 can do the import. You can move your ZA master over to that new server, and then you should probably take your Rel 7 IDM server out, upgrade it to Rel 8, and then add it back in. So if you're planning that, keep that in mind. It can be challenging because I went down a rabbit hole for like a day trying to figure out what was going on because it would work, and then it wouldn't work. The error messages were, of course, not as helpful as you would hope. While we're waiting on this, if anybody has any questions about what are kind of some of your use cases, if you want to put those into chat, we can discuss those.
I will say what I'm using IDM for right now is for satellite, my Rev, and then obviously OpenShift because it's a whole lot easier to fool with those wildcard domains using IDM instead of doing named.
So I looked into a word on wildcards. If you're trying to do a wildcard certificate, the schema does not support it out of the box. However, if you search on free IPA, find a schema that you can import into IPA to do that. You can create that wildcard certificate for things like OpenShift. So that is an option. Another question is, you can do an AD trust after the fact. You can. Just make sure that your realm is set up with the proper name before you do this. Otherwise, you're going to have potentially some problems. Let's see. One use case I had, the client at the last minute, literally the last 3 days, decided they wanted to collapse 2 subnets into a single subnet, and we had to migrate all of the clients over, break the Active Directory trust, and then set up the sync with one of their Active Directory servers. And we did that in 3 days. That we've called a lot of grep and sed and awk to produce a file with all of the appropriate user information so the Active Directory team could import the users into that. And then once they synced properly, things worked. They were able to log in with their Active Directory credentials and password. That seemed to work, and we were still able to centrally manage the sudo rules and a few other things. But Doug Schultz says, ew, on that timeline. Yeah. But that's the life of a consultant. And I was in Idaho at the time, so that was even more fun. But thankfully, I had the architect with me, and so I had an extra pair of hands on keyboard to help me knock that out. But we got it done, and then I got on the plane. Haven't heard anything so far. As far as I know, my brother's actually on a contract for the agency that's out there here, and still using it, so it must still be working. But on that one, they thought they were on Rel 5. They're actually on Rel 6. Initially brought there to help them go to Rel 7, which turned into something much more complicated. As it often does. How are we doing here? 43.
Yeah, Glenn, regarding consulting, yeah, I feel your pain. I was recently a road warrior for about 3 or 4 years.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. Of course, not so much, not a lot of road warrior stuff happening at the moment. Thankfully, my current client is in Chantilly, so I just hop in the car and drive down a couple of streets, and I get there. I'm quite thankful for that. So those of you who are interested in implementing free IPA or IDM, what is the attraction of it for you, or do you have any experience on it?
For me, I've used it, for a lot of my customers when I was in consulting, and as a TAM, some of my customers actually utilize it. But I'm more interested in it for lab purposes, utilize it for DNS, but yeah, I used to tie it in as, satellite, but at home I'm running Pi-hole, and I've just had some issues no matter where I seem to like integrate the two. So I'd love to pick everybody's brain maybe at the end of this call.
So while we're waiting on this, since we're still on package 46 of 98, I run Pi-hole. I use Pi-hole on for my wireless devices, and then the couple of instances where I have something tied into IDM, I just don't bother with the Pi-hole DNS on that. I just configure it to point the DNS at my at the appropriate at my lab IPA, and then let free IPA handle all of my streaming devices and IoT devices and whatnot. Because the forwarding kind of works in Pi-hole, but not as well as you would hope.
Yeah, I definitely had some DNS, some forwarding lag, like the last time I implemented it. But I just have been using Pi-hole for DNS. It was as a stopgap, and then it just kind of duct tape went into production.
Yeah. as it always does. Do you have any kind of separation between your lab and the rest of your network, your home network?
I mean, they're VLAN'd off, yeah.
Okay, so you have that.
I'm getting ready to rebuild all of my Rev infrastructure on my SAS disks. We just moved, and my computer came in, but can't find my hard drives.
That's always the thing. I did a rebuild here around the 4th of July. I upgraded my FreeBSD box to the current release. We swapped out all the drives with new drives, and I rebuilt my Red Hat virtualization infrastructure, and all that seemed to go okay. Then I even took I have IDM running on an Intel NUC, along with a couple other things like power and whatnot. You don't need a lot of horsepower for this. I'm running on a i3, and it doesn't even puff a little bit. And then I do that because that way you can blow away the rest of your lab and rebuild it with minimal impact, because it's all there.
That makes sense. Yeah, I was going to ask if the reason you have it on the NUC is it just because it's best to have DNS as a physical.
I like it. I had it in my own Rev, and then when I would do patching, it's always a case of the chicken and the egg. It's like I also had satellite on Rev, and then it's like, how do I patch when my patching source is on my lab? And I always ran into that problem. Well, if I want to run this the way you would run a lab, I moved the satellite off to another NUC, and then that just handles it, because I can patch satellites separately. It doesn't affect anything. And I can have all of my other devices registered to my satellite, and then I can patch them, reboot them, have them down, and my satellite still runs, my authentication still runs, my AutoFS home directory still run. There are just so many positives in doing it that way. While I'm waiting on the super slow thing to go here, let me change this up. And okay, so back over to Firefox. It's logged into my IPA server. Everybody see that screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So what I've done is a group called admins, and I've added a sudo rule to it called administrators. And this is where you got to kind of think what comes first, what comes next. So I'm going to say this rule applies to specified users and groups, people in this user group, admins. And I'm going to say you can access any host because you are an admin. You can run any command, again, because you are an admin. But if I wanted to, I could specify individual commands here, or I could specify a sudo or command group. I can deny specific commands, then say, who can I run as? So if you can create a command that somebody needs to become you need to sudo to Apache for something. You can say you can sudo to Apache, but not to root. Then, having created that, I can create my user. Edit. I'll add him to my user group. Use an admin. And then I should be able to go to policy and disable the allow all, because none of this works. If you have allow all is enabled by default, allowing anybody who wants to log in through that credential. And if this is a good way to test it, you can disable it, then see if it works. You can enable it if something goes sideways. The idea. And it's still running. So let's get back over here. I call it test user. Yeah, he should be fine. Back in here. He's in admins. So when I'm running into problems, this is actually pretty good. You can go under policy and go HBAC test. You can test this out. So I say I am the test user. I can say I'm trying to access my IPA server. And I'm trying to access from SSH. And allow all. I'm not allowed to get in. All right. Add in the user group. Any host. And link it in via SSH. Now go back to test. PA server, SSH. That enabled. Enable. Now let's try it. Why are you not showing up? Enabled. That's why. Oh, he's there. And there's you in here. Once again, the demo gods are failing us. Maybe that will fix it. Oh, I know why. So let's get into the IPA server itself. It's part of that. HBAC administrators, that's why. All right, well, let me get back and see if this is done installing. Package 66 of 98. And of course, it's the slowest part of the whole thing. Force me for trying to do a clean demo. Something I'm overlooking in identity management. So while I'm waiting on that, on my main machine, I've kind of got things set up. Let's go over network services and auto mount. So here's my auto mount. Go auto direct, and here's where I'm doing my home directories. I have everybody who is a IDM user will log into home IPA user. I set the mount information up, and it is using Kerberos, all the different options. This is hosted on my FreeNAS box. So once that is,
do you see much of performance degradation with the Kerberos? Because they were saying it was like 20% if you had all three of those running.
It doesn't hurt a thing at all. I don't notice any degradation. With that, if you're seeing degradation, I would suspect DNS.
That's just what the documentation said. I haven't actually turned it on yet.
Yeah, I haven't noticed a thing. It can't be that bad. Are you sure they didn't tell you if under certain conditions or under certain loads?
If you give me a minute, I'll try to find it real quick.
Yeah. So you set that up, and then if I go into IPA server, and I go into configuration. You go in here, you make your home directory base, home IPA user. That way, every user gets the same default home directory path. And then you can change your default shell here. I would leave it as bash because not every system will have like Z shell or C shell or corn installed. And that's the basic setup on that. Then as far as policy goes, let me see what I've done for this. Admins. In sudo. Then hosts. 001. I've not added him into anything. But he is part of the IPA members user group, host group. Okay, 20 more packages to go. And let's see here. IPA members. As part of 2H back, allow IPA users. And as the sudoer rule. That should be fine. Let me replicate that. Interesting. Oh, I know why. Okay. And host category equals all. So apparently I've run into a race condition that I've not seen before. I don't know what that is. All right. Build 20 packages. This is probably due to DNS being DNS and me running this in libvirt on my box. Those of you who have run it, what kind of challenges have you, anybody have any other challenges that have run into with when dealing with clients?
Other than not having enough time.
There's always that. There is always that.
Most of your clients opt for AD integration, or they usually keep the domains completely separate?
A lot of times they want to know, hey, can I get all the features without having to set up an additional domain? There's a lot of resistance to creating more domain infrastructure. There's a lot of that, well, gee, we kind of tied up our lives to Microsoft's Active Directory, and can't you just work some magic for us? Yeah, I'll get some of that. And then they find out all the things you can do. It says, well, can we do this with the registry? And the answer is no, you really can't. Microsoft hasn't had that kind of Linux integration since, I don't know, Server 2003, I think, and they kind of pulled it out. Even once had NFS support, and they pulled that out, I think, a while ago too. One of the Go ahead.
Have you worked with any clients that do smart card integration with IDM?
I'm not familiar with smart guard.
Smart cards.
Oh, smart card.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's possible. You can. The last time I tried it, the problem was getting the right pieces together. We had to is understanding the backend infrastructure. So because we ran into the problem a few years ago where the DISA came out and said everybody's going to have a separate card to do privileged user activities, and we couldn't make that work. It's been probably 5 years since I've did smart card. You can do it to do the SSH part, but your sudoer will not be smart card integrated. You'll have to use something else. I think we ended up using an RSA token.
So they can SSH to the box, it just can't elevate the smart card.
Right. They won't use it. They won't have it with the smart card. No.
But could they just do like no password and sudoers?
Sure. That kind of defeats the Linux security model when you do that. Matter of
fact,
fact,
I was just thinking of STIGs. If you don't use passwords from interactive logons, you don't have to have a password and sudoers.
You're talking about for the SSH part. I thought you were talking about the sudoer piece. SSH, yeah, you can still use. You can still use a public key to SSH over.
Okay.
That's essentially what you're doing. Is you're using the key provided by the client. The other thing you have to have is coming from the Windows client. You got to make sure the client you're using is able to pass the smart card credentials over to the SSH server piece.
Yeah.
So, and we had to find, there's a putty CAC out there, and they explained how to do the integration somewhat. Helping you get working with a regular Linux account, so you know you have the client end stuff set up, and then focus on the other piece. You would have to have, I think we had to add the public key into each user. Yeah, we had to add the public key into each user's IDM account, and then they were able to authenticate.
Okay.
Yeah, that part wasn't too terrible, and we had to do one other thing, but like I said, it's been 5 years, and I don't even know if I still have my notes. But it is possible. But if they come at you and say, "Hey, we need give you a deck of cards," which was what they were looking at 5 years ago. was, you need to have a separate card reader with a separate card to do elevator privilege stuff. And I'm like, we had to explain that, no, that's actually, you're thinking of the Windows security model, the Linux security model is totally different. And they said, but DISA said this. It's like, yeah, but let's talk to DISA and see what they actually say about doing this with Linux. We had to go with the other option where we used an RSA token, so that was an acceptable workaround, and that used Radius authentication, I think.
That's what we're currently using. We're trying to get away from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, it works pretty well, but we just like something that we can manage more than just authentication.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the only reason why the Radius authentication piece worked for elevator privileges was because we had there was like an SSH client came from RSA for that. No, a pseudoware client that came from that. But yeah, you can do the common access card piece for the login piece. That you can control what people can do through a pseudoware rule.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. What other challenges have people had? Because this thing is got 19 packages left. Yeah, the one time I needed to be fast, and of course it isn't because it's DNS probably. Can cover some of the Ansible roles while we wait. All right, so you can manage from the free IP service. You can do the IPA DNS record. I've made a lot of use of that. You can say, you tell it, hey, I want to create a DNS record, and then use an Ansible fact to define its IP address, its node name, its host name, all that fun stuff. You can use it to create your DNS zones, your host groups, all these fun things. If there is a vault function, which I used in class, I've never used since. I just haven't had a use case for it. You can do some of your global configurations, set up your DNS forwarders, that sort of thing. Then how I use this in my Ansible's work. When I register a client, can everybody see this even though it's going across my whole screen?
You're still only sharing Firefox.
Oh, sorry. Let me switch over. My first time doing this kind of presentation. Okay, so can everybody see my terminal now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so this is where we combine the Ansible module with Ansible facts. So first I will create the DNS record using the Ansible facts. I've defined this is the IDM host I've defined in a group. This is the username and password I store in an Ansible vault. And then I use a Ansible fact with split, grab the first, actually the second digit off of the IP address, and that helps me create the zone name. Then I give it a type, and then a new thing is you have to put in the record time to live. 3600 seems to be sufficient. That was a new wrinkle in, I think, Ansible 2.7. And then I separately create the reverse lookup record. And by having all this in here, it just makes my life a lot easier. It's one less thing you have to do manually. Then client enrollment. When you register a client, it creates this default configuration file. If it's not enrolled, it will not be there. That's how I check the registration status. And then everything else executes on a block dependent on whether or not this file exists. Installs the IPA client package. The client install is not something you can do directly from Ansible. You have to run this through a shell. But I do use Ansible Facts to get the node name, my IDM username and password. I enable the make home directory. I am using the IPA generated SSHD records to allow the DNS updates. You have to go in and set up your DNS to allow those updates to propagate. I do not configure MTP. I leave it as the defaults, and I set up my auto mount location, and that's what gives me the auto mounted home directories. And the -- unattended allows it to run from Ansible to no user input. Then I found a couple of wrinkles. When you're doing a stigged box, sometime I will go through and I will make sure just LDAP auth, fail lock are disabled, and just make sure main and home directory are set in that auth config file. I will make sure that there is that the services line in SSHD includes AutoFS. It doesn't always. Then I'll make sure NS switch. There's not a sudoers line in NS switch. It isn't always created. Make sure that sudoers has files in SSH for SSHD. And then I'll make sure the SSHD service is actually running. So that covers most of the problems that I've run across when registering clients and trying to figure out why things aren't working on this one client. I really like the code.
Have you looked at the free IPA Ansible modules at all?
There's a couple of them out there. I don't think there's anything official. I've not played with it yet. And for my money, everything I need already comes baked into the Ansible tool. But it seems that Ansible is kind of taking things and pushing them towards system roles. If you take the RHEL 8, the third class, which covers all of the Ansible things, prepares you for the engineering exam, that is in the training. Where they talk about installing this and using system roles. I think it's in the current Ansible training. I took the Ansible course and got the certification last year. I don't remember that being in there though.
In
the training.
Roles.
No. But it's like I said, I'm thinking this is where Ansible's kind of headed into create a requirements document, and then you pull in from Galaxy or Git or someplace all of your different roles, and then it's populated there. Right. When I installed my first RHEL 8 client, the NMCLI module didn't work because RHEL 8 doesn't have the appropriate network manager package. So that's when the first time I had to go and use the RHEL or Linux system roles.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So is your code here in GitHub or GitLab, or do we have access to it?
Let's see. I've got stuff badly all over the place. Git remote
link in the chat. That'd be awesome.
I was going to say your GitHub did not have any of this, your Ansible playbooks or anything.
Yeah, this could be in.
And then I've got a question that's unrelated to IDM, but I liked the horizontal line in Vim. I'm constantly improving the Vim RC when I'm teaching, and I do vertical lines and everything else. What are you using for that horizontal line?
Let's see. So I am using. Are you talking about? There's a couple things. So this is strictly Vim. So let's see here.
Show
cursor line.
Cursor line. All right.
So, and if you're setting up VI, I highly recommend enabling these options.
Can you post that somewhere too?
Yeah, let me add that up here. I will put it into chat. that helps out quite a bit, because especially when you're trying to write YAML, makes your life just so much easier. Because having to tap, or trying to select and move a block of text around that moves an incorrect number of spaces, it just ruins your day. Let's see. Okay, now we're verifying. All right, we're getting close. Fingers crossed. And it's verifying, so let me... Okay. Package 62. Wow, didn't think it was going to take this long. I'll this for the next time I do a demo. So if you want to have me back and run a couple of things, what are sort of the things that you're trying to do in IDM? Either speak up or put it in chat.
Everything.
There's a lot under the line everything.
Yeah.
Are you?
I'm just trying. Honestly, right now I'm struggling with just trying to create a cert for a server.
Okay.
There's obviously some concepts I haven't grasped yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I select my host and I select new cert. It comes back and says principal does not exist. I don't understand that at all.
Principal does not exist. So I can kind of run through some of that. Let's see. Let me launch. Let me get into Atom and get into my notes. Let me get over here and I can cover that one right. Stop sharing this screen. Let's share. I heard my notes for this, and I think I do have this out on GitHub. When you're dealing with the principal, a line here is you create a principal for the service you're trying to deal with. So when you specify, when you do the cert request, it's going to ask you for a principal name, and it can be like here I create HTTP. It could also be host. Principal is referring to the server, which is going to be assigned in the subject line of your certificate.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have that, that's why you're getting the principal error condition.
Gotcha. You have to have a service well as a host entry.
It's something that I dug out of the satellite documentation when I set this up.
Yeah,
way back in 6.3.
I'm actually trying to create a cert for a satellite server.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did that, and then of course you have to create your key.
Yep.
You have to do your create your new request, just like any other thing. The part that gets a little different is how you actually request the key. And here I actually did host just to show it. Request it, CSR.
But you have to have a service that says host / satellite.
That's it. Because satellite is already registered to IDA. That is created when you register.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like because that says, hey, this is an ID, this is a host, and this is this. That's just kind of a unique IDM piece. I haven't done Active Directory SSL certificates outside of somebody set up a web service, you fill out the form, and magic happens in the background. Let's see. And then when you get your certificate, don't forget to put in the raw portion, or you won't get a proper certificate output. And then I make sure that all of the certificate files have a new line character at the end. I've run into that situation when I'm running the Catello certs check. And then the only other part is you want to make sure that your system will trust your certificate. So make sure you have your IDM certificate copied over to the etc/PKI anchors directory, and that seems to solve that problem.
Did you have these notes posted somewhere?
Let me see. I've been
in Google Docs or something.
Nah, try not to put code in Google Docs just because it's Google Docs. Problem with most word processors is it keeps on trying to do things like
the quotes are terrible in Google Docs.
Yeah, quotes, and then like dash dash turns into a big dash. I find annoying. Let's see here. I don't know if it's in here or not.
Gary, you watching a movie or something?
What's that?
Are you playing a video game, watching a movie? What are you doing, man?
I'm just watching what's going on here.
I'm just yanking your chain.
Hey, it's finally done.
I've been muted most of the time.
Uh-huh.
So if you're interested in my vimrc file, there is my dot files in chat. That's how I try to manage all my shell files in the Git repo because it makes setting up a new environment so much easier. Let's see. So it looks like we are out of waiting to install badness. I install. Let's see what happens. So, if you have your DNS set up properly, it will go out and it will discover that you have a the DNS domain name, the IPA name, and the base DN name. On the options I used here, make home directory, and then I'm not configuring NTP. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to try to authenticate. Okay. Trying to register now, fingers crossed. You can see it's doing a large amount of things. So what did it do? So it created and enabled SSSD, and set up itself an LDAP, and it copied down the root certificate to Etsy right there. And if you ever need that file for a web server, you need to trust it, copy that into JTrust source anchors directory. Otherwise, you're going to have a certificate that isn't trusted, and you won't know why. It also put in, and it did create, like it did try to create a DNS record. So let's see, dig. Did that. Doesn't always do the though. Let's see. No, it did not. So let me jump out of this and see if this has even been set up. Network services, DNS. Okay, so I have to do that. So this is why when I do things with Ansible, I create this manually, just because it doesn't always work. .4. PTR, and then client. Put the period at the end. One thing to make out when you're creating a CNAME or a PTR record, make sure to put the period at the end. Otherwise, you will not get a proper DNS record. Go back to my terminal. There you go. We have forward and reverse DNS set up on this machine. Let's see. Then I can identify the test user. Then I should be able to canit admin. This will show me principal name, which you were asking about ahead of time. It has created that host with that name at the realm name, principal alias.
Maybe that's what
let's see. And then it does not say it's part of any groups. So, anyways, we've been through enough of that. I have to figure out why I was having these edge case issues with the host groups, and then maybe do that part of the demo another time. Is there anything else you want to cover? Because I've been at this for about an hour now. I will post my IPA SSL how-to notes. It covers over to GitHub. It covers setting up Ansible Tower. It covers up setting up Satellite, and it covers up setting up rev/overt. You'll be able to use not only IDM for the authentication piece, you can also use it to control log into those devices via a host-based access control rule, which is really it's almost an RBAC. So that's a topic for another demo.
Sounds good.
Yeah. So, if you want to have me back, what are let's talk about a specific use case. What would you